We are now ready for Act 2, Scene 1, Scene 2. Now I'm going to make some observations, so we're going to listen to this thing, then we're going to come back to make some final observations. These two scenes, put them in your notes, these two scenes go together. In other words, when you watch the play performed on stage, you never know the difference between the two scenes. They're one nice flowing scene. So let's outline real quickly what's going on. First of all, we will have in 2-1 the introduction again of Banquo. He will be with his son Fleance, a young boy. Their job is to be a night watchman, to watch the battlements in the evening. The goal is for Banquo to help his son when Macbeth shows up. Now, Macbeth will have a brief comment to Banquo, and then Macbeth will be left alone on a soliloquy of his own. I'm with you now on page 362. Now, this is a hard scene to listen to. It's much easier to watch, and here's why. Are you ready for this? Macbeth starts to hallucinate. Now, what does that mean? He sees things that aren't there. And what he sees is a bloody dagger, a knife, with blood all over it. When he reaches for the dagger, he can't grab it. Now, there's two ways to perform this on stage. One is that there's nothing there, and he just sees it, but we, the audience, know that he's just seeing it because there ain't nothing there. Another way to do this is to actually have a prop where you drop it kind of down out of the ceiling, and every time he reaches for it, the knife will go up back into the darkness again, so you can tell that he's seeing it, but it's not actually there. Macbeth is seriously worked up at the end of 2-1 as he gets ready to go and do what really is a dastardly deed, to kill the old man Duncan. Okay. Now, we already commented on the fact that this is a pretty insane plan, that we're going to blame bodyguards whose job it is to defend the king. We're going to smear blood all over them while they're lying there drunk. And then when they wake up in the morning, the dead body of Duncan is in between them. And the obvious question will be, dude, why did you kill the king? And they will, of course, report, I can't remember killing a king, but we were partying pretty hard last night with Lady Macbeth. And that's the last thing we recall. This doesn't occur to Macbeth, Lady Macbeth, that when those guys wake up, they're obviously going to have a thing or two to say about the last thing they were doing, and it was, of course, messing around with Lady Macbeth. Needless to say, Lady Macbeth on 363, again, I'm just setting you up here. On 363, Lady Macbeth comes in comes onto the stage, and she will say, that which hath made them drunk hath made me bold. What does that mean? What's Lady Macbeth been doing with the bodyguards? Wine and wassail is the phrase that she will use earlier. Wine, I think you know about. Wassail, you can do your own Google search for. Let's just say that Lady Macbeth will go to any means to make sure that these guys are vulnerable, shall we say it that way? Lady Macbeth, man, she will do what she has to do to get what she wants. What does she want?
Power.
Yeah, it's interesting to say it, power or to be queen. Notice that in both of those answers, neither of you said anything about Macbeth himself. That is to say, she wants to help her man out. Notice, both comments, power and to be queen, doesn't say anything about Macbeth himself. Of course, by extension, to be the queen, he must be the king. And yet, you're kind of right. It seems like Lady Macbeth is pretty much into this project for her own benefit. She will come onto the stage, ironic here, Mr. Keeley, and she will say, all kinds of Freudian overtones here. I would have killed him myself, Duncan. I would have killed him myself because the bodyguards now are drunk, asleep on the floor next to the bed. But he looked too much like my daddy for me to stab him. So I'm going to have to let Macbeth do it. She then is standing there, and off stage you will hear voices, like kind of shouting, like, hey, what, like that kind of stuff. And then she's jumpy, right? She's jumpy. And then onto the stage will come Macbeth himself. Couple of things for your notes before you listen to this. Again, this is a scene much preferred to be watched than to be listened to. Some of you will lament the fact that we didn't have the advantage of these lectures last semester before we watched the performance of Macbeth, because then when you were watching the play, you would be able to kind of pay attention to a scene like this. Macbeth comes on stage, two things about him. One, he's got to be covered in blood. You got to be covered. For you to stab someone sleeping with double knives, there's a lot of blood that's going to come out of that body. Got me? So that's the first thing. He's got blood all over. Certainly on his hands, certainly on the knives. Are you ready for this? He comes onto the stage with the knives in his hand. He's holding the weapons that he's jacked the old man with. Okay? The second thing I would say about Macbeth when he comes on stage is his face. You got to be a good actor to play this role well, because when he comes on stage, his face looks like there is something seriously wrong with him. A good way, a single word to describe it is simply horror. That is to say, incredible fear. All right? Now, we've already seen that Macbeth has this tendency towards hallucinating, and that his heart really wasn't 100% in the taking of this old man's life. But when he comes on stage, he does not look like the guy we saw in 1-3 who said, "So foul and fair a day I have not seen." It does not look like that guy. He is already starting to look like a broken man. Now, let's point out something that Shakespeare understands about the criminal mind. And you can put this in your notes as that, the criminal mind, and Shakespeare's understanding of the criminal mind. Shakespeare gives us a criminal, and not unlike a number of criminals. For example, Mr. Nelson, if you go into the prison system and you sit down with individuals who have taken the life of another person, a murderer, it's interesting to do those kinds of interviews. Often they will say the following. Look, here's the thing. Premeditated murder. Here's the thing. I knew I was going to kill him. Right? I knew. It was all set up. The plan was totally set up. And it was really weird because before I got ready to kill him, it seemed like everything was just going really, really fast. Like I was almost spinning in a vortex is often the language that's used. Then all of a sudden I took out my gun and whoo, I blew him away. In the moment that I blew him away, many serial killers will report this. Many killers, murderers will report this. In the moment, whoo, I blew him away, there's this weird thing that happens where time seems to go and just stop. Like the language they will often use is stand still. It's like time stands still. And all of the senses are really elevated. So for example, murderers who have shot someone will report what the sound or what the smell of the gunpowder was like out of their firearm. It's like really strong in their nostrils. Or for example, if blood hit them. Because if you shoot someone, blood comes back usually. If blood hit, the smell of the blood, the feel of the blood, all of the senses are really heightened. And it's like all of time just goes and just stops. But then the third part is what happens immediately afterwards. And many, many killers have reported this. Where all of a sudden, it's like from a dead standstill, where, especially with the firearm, because it's usually so close, the ears are ringing. Again, all the senses, what you can hear, what you can taste, what you can feel, all that, see, all of that. And then all of a sudden, it's like the world starts spinning really, really quickly. We know that the majority of criminals, murderers, are actually caught in the first couple of hours after they commit the murder. Weird stories. Like, for example, they'll blow somebody away, and then they'll go and get in their car and put the pistol on the seat next to them, and they'll run 3 straight red lights. And when the police comes up to them to check on, dude, you just ran the red light, there's the gun, and they've got blood on their face. And that's how they get caught. Happens all the time. The real criminal is the one who can commit the crime and then walk away from the crime without getting caught. In other words, got his head about him, his wits about him. Shakespeare will show us this on stage, and that's what makes this scene so remarkable. Macbeth will kill the old man, but he'll come on stage and he's a broken man. It's fairly evident that there's something wrong with Macbeth. Lady Macbeth will do one of these. What is wrong with you? Straighten up, right? She will say something quite fascinating. A little blood cleanses us of this deed. A little water cleanses of this deed. Meaning what? All you got to do is what? Go wash your hands. It ain't no big thing. She will say, the dead are but as sleeping people. It's not to be feared. And then all of a sudden she realizes that he's got the knives in. She's like, what are you doing with the knives in your hand? Take them back in. He's like, no, I ain't going back in that room. I'm not going to look on what I've done. She will say, you're a wimp. She'll say, infirm of purpose. She'll take the knives. She'll go off stage. And while she's off stage, all of a sudden, there's this loud banging sound that starts happening, which will totally freak out Macbeth. Now, what it is it's morning time. And the guys who are coming, his name is Macduff, we haven't met him yet, the guys who are coming to pick up King Duncan from the house of Macbeth, they're knocking on the front door. But every time they hit that door, it just freaks out Macbeth. Again, he's just totally freaked out. When Lady Macbeth comes back on stage, and Lady Macbeth is a changed woman. She will have blood on her. All right? And she ain't the strong, proud woman she was before. What she's looked at off stage has completely changed her as well. Notice Shakespeare doesn't show us the death of Duncan. Did you notice this? Put it in your notes. It's important. Why doesn't he show us the death of Duncan? Why does he have two actors come on stage with looks of horror on their face for what they've seen? In a little bit, we'll have a third actor that will have seen that body in that bedroom stabbed to death multiple times. Why doesn't Shakespeare himself show this murder on stage? Now, when you see film versions of this, like a Roman Polanski version I'll show to you, you actually get to see the murder. It's one of the high points in Hollywood. When they make Macbeth as a movie, they often will show this murder. Shakespeare didn't do it. How come?
The imagination.
That's right. It's a brilliant observation, Keeley. Shakespeare knows how to rely on the imagination of his audience. Holy cow. If that's the way a guy who could stand in the middle of the battlefield and slaughter people, slit them from their groin to their gullet and pull out all their innards, but when he comes on stage, he's that freaked out, what's it got to look like in that bedroom where he stabbed that old man over and over again? It allows for the mind to do its work. Imagination. Macbeth will report, while he was killing Duncan, that the two bodyguards set up, looked at each other in their drunken state, and started conversing to each other. One of the bodyguards started to say a prayer. They're drunk. Started to say a prayer as Macbeth is stabbing the old man. They start talking, conversing, and then one of them starts saying a prayer. Macbeth says he could swear that he heard a voice that whispered in the house, Macbeth hath murdered sleep. Nobody's going to sleep anymore in this house. And we'll find out that this is the case. From this point on, Macbeth cannot sleep. He has a difficult time getting any rest, which is why he'll begin to drink so much. He also says he tries, because they're saying a prayer, he tries to say amen at the end of their prayer. He can't say it. It's stuck in his throat. It starts to freak him out. Lady Macbeth will again point out, dude, you're just kind of a whack job right now. You need to just calm down. We need to just change our clothes. We need to clean the blood off our face. It ain't going to be no big thing. Of course, the biggest problem is what's going to happen when they discover the body of Duncan and those two drunk bodyguards lying next to them. We'll get to that scene. It's coming. All right, here we go. 2-1, 2-2. Again, we'll listen to them together as two scenes together. You want to follow along, all right? And then obviously after we come back, we'll have more to say on both of these scenes.
How goes the night, boy?
The moon is down. I have not heard the clock.
She goes down at 12.
I take 'tis later, sir.
Oh, take my sword. There's husbandry in heaven. Their candles are all out. Take thee that too. If this summons lies like lead upon me, and yet I would not sleep. Powers restrain in me the cursed thoughts that nature gives way to in repose. Give me my sword. Who's there?
A friend.
What, sir? Not yet at rest? The king's abed. He hath been in unusual pleasure and sent forth great largesse to your offices. This diamond he greets your wife withal, by the name of most kind hostess, and shut up in measureless content.
Being unprepared, our will became the servant to defect, which else should free have wrought.
All's well. I dreamt last night of the three weird sisters. To you, they have showed some truth.
I think not of them. Yet, when we can entreat an hour to serve, we would spend it in some words upon that business, if you would grant the time.
At your kindest leisure.
If you shall cleave to my consent when 'tis, it shall make honor for you.
So I lose none in seeking to augment it, but still keep my bosom franchised and allegiance clear. I shall be counselled.
Good repose the while.
Thanks, sir. The like to you.
Go. Bid thy mistress, when my drink is ready, she strike upon the bell. Get thee to bed.
Is this a dagger which I see before me? The handle toward my hand. Come, let me clutch thee. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still. Art thou not, fatal vision, sensible to feeling as to sight? Or art thou but a dagger of the mind, a false creation proceeding from the heat-oppressed brain? I see thee yet, in form as palpable as this which now I draw. Thou marshals me the way that I was going, and such an instrument I was to use. Mine eyes have made the fools of the other senses, or else worth all the rest. I see thee still, and on thy blade and dudgeon gouts of blood, which was not so before. There's no such thing. It is the bloody business which informs thus to mine eyes. Now, o'er the one half world, nature seems dead, and wicked dreams abuse the curtained sleep. Witchcraft celebrates pale Hecate's offerings, and withered murder, alarumed by his sentinel, the wolf, whose howls his watch. Thus, with his stealthy pace, with Tarquin's ravishing strides, towards his design moves like a ghost. Thou sure and firm set earth, hear not my steps which way they walk, for fear thy very stones prate of my whereabout, and take the present horror from the time, which now suits with it. While thy threat he lives, words to the heat of deeds too cold breath gives. I go and it is done. The bell invites me. Hear it not, Duncan, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to hell.
That which has made them drunk has made me bold. What has quenched them has given me fire. Hark! Peace. It was the owl that shrieked, the fatal bellman which gives the sternest good night. He is about it. The doors are open, and the surfeited grooms do mock their charge with snores. I've drugged their possets that death and nature do contend about them, whether they live or die. Alack, I'm afraid they have awaked, and 'tis not done. The attempt and not the deed confounds us. Hark! I laid their daggers ready, he could not miss them. Had he not resembled my father as he slept, I had done it. My husband.
I have done the deed. Didst thou not hear a noise?
I heard the owl scream and the crickets cry. Did not you speak?
When?
Now.
As I descended?
Aye.
Hark! Who lies in the second chamber?
Donald.
The is a sorry sight.
A foolish thought to say a sorry sight.
There's one did laugh in sleep, and one cried, murder, that they did wake each other. I stood and heard them, but they did say their prayers and addressed them again to sleep.
There are two lodged together.
One cried, God bless us, and amen, the other, as they'd seen me with these hangman's hands. Listening their fear, I could not say amen when they did say God bless us.
Consider it not so
But
deeply.
wherefore could I not pronounce amen? I had most need of blessing, and amen stuck in my throat.
These deeds must not be thought after these ways, so it will make us
I
mad.
thought I heard a voice cry, sleep no more. Macbeth does murder sleep. The innocent sleep. Sleep that knits up the ravelled sleeve of care. The death of each day's life. Sore labour's bath. Balm of hurt minds. Great nature's second cause. Chief nourisher in life's feast.
What do you mean?
Still it cried, sleep no more to all the house. Glamis hath murdered sleep. And therefore Cawdor shall sleep no more. Macbeth shall sleep no more.
Who was it that thus cried? Why, worthy Thane, you do unbend your noble strength to think so brain-sickly of things. Go, get some water and wash this filthy witness from your hand. Why did you bring these daggers from the place? They must lie there. Go, carry them, and smear the sleepy brooms with blood.
I'll go no more. I'm afraid to think what I've done. Look on again, I dare not.
Infirm of purpose. Give me the daggers. Sleeping and the dead are but as pictures. 'Tis the eye of childhood that fears a painted devil. If he do bleed, I'll gild the faces of the grooms withal, for it must seem their guilt.
Whence is that knocking? Oh, is't with me when every noise appalls me. What hands are here? They pluck out mine eyes. Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? No, this my hand will rather the multitudinous seas incarnadine, making the green one red.
My hands are of your colour, but I shame to wear a heart so white. We are knocking at the south entry. Retire we to our chamber. A little water clears us of this deed. How easy is it then? Your constancy hath left you unattended. Hark! More knocking. Get on your nightgown, lest occasion call us and show us to be watchers. Be not lost so poorly in your thoughts.
To know my deed, 'twere best not know myself. Wake, Duncan, with thy knocking. I would thou couldst.
We have already commented on some of the major themes of this play. One of those themes we said early on in 1-1, fair is foul and foul is fair, hover through the fog and filthy air. The fact that you're not always going to be able to see very well what's going on. Let's point out that one of the implications of that theme is that a lot of times people will do things without realizing, for lack of a better phrase, the ripple effect. You know what I mean by that? So in other words, you do something or you say something and it doesn't occur to you that down the line, that doing or saying something is going to come back to jack you. This is exactly what we will see in 2-1, 2-2. Macbeth will it'll only start to kind of, he'll begin to comprehend what it is that they have done. Another major theme, and we saw this in 1-7, is this theme of manhood. This idea of what it means to be a man. Notice already we're playing this game again over on page 362. And Macbeth is looking at a false dagger. It's an illusion. It's a hallucination. And already he's beginning to doubt his own mind. He's got a weak mind, we might say. And this is already part of this discussion about what makes a real man. Let's go to that soliloquy real quickly of Macbeth. One more time. he's going to talk about what it is he has to do. Notice on page 362, right before he has this soliloquy, Macbeth will say to Banquo, hey, well, let's back up a little. Go to 360. Macbeth will be told that the king has given Macbeth a diamond. Do you see it on line 16? This makes it even more difficult for Macbeth. Here comes Duncan giving niceties to Macbeth, and Macbeth is going to turn around and kill the old man, right? So, I mean, it's kind of sad. Notice Macbeth will say, being unprepared, our will became the servant to defect, which else should free have wrought. In other words, an interesting sidebar. This is dramatic irony. Notice your sidebar will even suggest this, right? Macbeth tells Banquo that he and his wife couldn't entertain the king as they would have liked. Of course, this notion of entertaining the king takes on nasty double meanings. Yeah, we're going to take care of the king. The way we're going to take care of the king is by planning to slit his throat. Nasty. He's giving them diamonds, and they're going to give him, cuts in the throat. Notice Macbeth Banquo will say, all's well. It's no big deal if you weren't there. And then Banquo will say, I dreamt last night of the 3 weird sisters. Notice they're not called witches here, they're called weird sisters. He says, to you they've shown some truth. Wow. Remember you were like promised to be Thane of Cawdor, and all of a sudden it happened. Wow, to you they've shown some truth. Notice Macbeth's response. Total lie. I think not of them. Yeah, I don't even know what are you talking. What are you talking about? I don't even know what you're talking about, dude. I've totally forgotten about those. Oh yeah, that's right. We saw those 3 weird. Then look what he says. Oh yeah. By the way, yet when we can entreat an hour to serve, we would spend it in some words upon that business, if you would grant the time. Put it in your own words. What's he say? I'd like to talk with you about that. You know that thing about those 3 sisters, those weird sisters, those witches and their prophecies? I'd like to talk about it with you. And Banquo says, top of page 362, at your kindest leisure. Dude, anytime you want. I'm more than free to talk about that. To which Macbeth says, if you shall cleave to my consent. It's interesting, the word cleave. What does the word cleave mean? Does anyone know what a cleaver is? You got it, that which cuts. If you should cleave, cleave also means to clean, right? It has 2 meanings, both to split asunder and to come together. If you shall cleave to my consent, when it shall make honor for you. Put it in your own words. What's he say to Banquo? I got something I want to talk to you about that could bring honor to you, right? I could bring honor to you. Look at what Banquo says. All right, so I lose none in sinking to augment it. Wow, what has he just said? This is an important observation. This sets up the real man versus the false man. Who's the real man? Banquo. What does he say about getting honor? Macbeth says, hey, I want to talk to you about something. You could get a lot of honor. What's Banquo's response? Sure, I'll talk to you as long as in gaining honor, I don't what? Lose any honor. Right? Well, now that's ironic. Why? Because what's Macbeth trying to gain? Honor, power, ambition. But obviously to get it, what did we say? He got what he wanted, but what? He lost what he had. You got it. He lost what he had. All of the honor that Macbeth had, he's about to lose. Then we get into this. Soliloquy at line 60. Whilst I threat, he lives. Words to the heat of deeds, too cold breath gives. In other words, I got to get this done now. We got to go. We got to go. We got to go. Right? The idea here is he doesn't want to think about. He wants this act to be thought less. And off he goes. Notice he will say, Duncan, it's a knell, the bell, that summons thee to heaven or to hell. I'm going to jack you. This is it. Lady Macbeth then will come on stage, and when you have this back and forth, notice when Macbeth comes on stage on 363, Macbeth will say, I have done the deed. Didst thou not hear a noise? I heard the owl scream, back to bird theme again. Anytime an owl screams, by the way, some of you are kind of getting a little bit freaked out by all that wind last night. See, in Elizabethan times, a bunch of you would not have come to school this morning. Why not? Because in Elizabethan times, all that wind last night bodes something bad is happening. They were very superstitious people. If they saw a black cat, immediately went indoors and stayed the rest of the day. If they saw an owl, serious bad omen to see or hear an owl. These are all bad signs, okay? I remember giving this lecture once and one of my students said, "Oh, my grandma's like that. She's very superstitious, and if there's certain things that happen, like she once saw an owl, she immediately drove home and went inside and she stayed for the rest of the day and did not come out because she is freaked out by it." See, this is the kind of superstition. Notice she will say, Lady Macbeth will say, "Yeah, I heard an owl, if that's what you're talking about. I heard an owl scream. Did you not speak?" Notice Macbeth. "When? Now," she says, "as I descended, I, hark." Notice these little staccatoed lines. What's Shakespeare doing? Write it down in your notes. What's he accomplishing with these little one-word, two-word back and forths on stage, going back and forth between each other? He's creating tension, isn't he? Drama, dramatic tension. Macbeth is seriously on edge. He has committed the murder, but he is one freaked out guy. It's one thing to commit an act. It's another thing to live with the act, which is why oftentimes we believe serial killers or mass murderers take their own life. They realize in the moment of the execution of people, number of people possibly, that they can't live with themselves. So they take their life. Notice here, he'll say it's a sorry sight, you know, the blood all over his hands. I'm at the top of 364. A foolish thought, Lady Macbeth will say, to say a sorry sight. Come on, knock it off. This is just killing somebody. It ain't no big thing. And then he'll say, there's these two bodyguards. First they started laughing, then they set up, then they started praying, and then I could have sworn I heard the house say, "Macbeth hath murdered sleep. The Thane of Cawdor hath murdered sleep." And to that degree, yeah, it's no good. It's no good. He couldn't say amen. Lady Macbeth will say something very fascinating at line 32. And this is one of the reasons why we read this play and don't just watch this play. Look what she says on page 364, at roughly line 32. "These deeds," what deeds? Killing the king. "These deeds must not be thought after these ways, so it will make us mad." What does she say to Macbeth? Don't think about it. Just don't think about it. You can't think about this, because if you start thinking about what you've done, it's going to drive you nuts. Are you ready for this for your notes? One of the reasons why psych majors will read this play. This play was actually introduced to me as a psychology major long before as a humanities scholar. This play shows what happens when a guy does a terrible deed and then he has to live with it. This play shows the declension into madness. It will actually on stage show you what it's like to lose your mind. How do we already know Macbeth's starting to lose his mind? What happened earlier in this act? He started hallucinating and thinking he saw stuff that wasn't actually there. That's the first indication. Now she will say it out loud. You can't think this way, it'll lose you. "Methought I heard a voice cry, 'Sleep no more.' Macbeth had murdered sleep, the innocent sleep, sleep that knits up the raveled sleeve of care, the death of each day life, sore labor's bath, balm of hurt minds, great nature's second course, chief nourisher in life's feast." A multiple ways to say, if you can't sleep, by the way, this for your notes is what we call in psychological terms, you've probably heard this, sleep deprivation. We know how to make someone lose their mind. It's pretty simple. All you have to do is monitor their sleep patterns, and when they start dreaming, wake them up. They'll be completely nuts in a matter of days if you do this. Really? It's not because of their lack of sleep. It's because of their lack of dreaming, their ability to ever hit REM sleep. You can do this relatively easy, and we know tragically that these kinds of studies were conducted in, for example, different kinds of prison camps during the Second World War, as they began to try and test the limits of, if you really want to jack with somebody, don't let them sleep. Of course, some of you have had to go for several hours without sleep, like maybe you decided, I'm going to go a couple of days and I'm not going to sleep. Some of us maybe in work situations where we had to do it or whatever, and all of a sudden weird things, our mind just starts doing weird things. You're not real good with driving vehicles and stuff after a day or two without sleep. Macbeth will say, I'm not going to be able to sleep anymore. By the way, this is a prophecy by Macbeth that does come true. He can't sleep anymore. As I told you already, he's going to say it's like somebody put scorpions in my brain and they just keep stinging my brain. Macbeth will say, still it cried, Glamis hath murdered sleep, and therefore Cador shall sleep no more. Macbeth shall sleep no more. Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. Notice, Lady Macbeth's trying to figure out what's going on. And then all of a sudden she sees he's got the daggers in his hand. She's like, quick, take them back. Macbeth, I'll go no more. I'm afraid to think what I have done. Line 50. Look on it again. I dare not. Dude, this is a guy who's been on a battlefield covered in blood, but he cannot look. He cannot look again at a murdered man. Why? What's the difference between killing guys on the battlefield and stabbing this old man?
Because then it was killed, be killed.
Right. This is a different project entirely, isn't it? It's completely dishonorable. Notice what she says. Infirm of purpose. She says, you wimp. This takes us back to 1:7. Give me the daggers. And then look what she says. The sleeping and the dead are but his pictures. 'Tis the eye of childhood that fears a painted devil. You're like a little boy. Give me the daggers. I'll go in. Macbeth will begin to hear the knocking. And then he'll look at his hands. Pluck out mine eyes. Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? I don't understand this. Talk about this in your notes. He says, I can't wash this blood from my hands. But that's silly. Here in a little bit when we see Macbeth again, he'll have no blood on his hands. He'll have washed it all off. And yet he says, it's an interesting word picture, he says it would turn the entire blue ocean red for me to put my hands into the ocean. What is he saying about? This is guilt. Let's write it in our notes. This is guilt. He can wash the physical blood from his hands, but he's never going to be able to wash the blood from his hands mentally. It's stuck now. It's there. It's stuck. It's like the great line from Cormac McCarthy's The Road, a classic novel, where the father will say to the son, be careful what you put into your mind, because once it's there, it never goes away. It is a profound insight. Of course, Cormac McCarthy didn't come up with that idea. Shakespeare certainly did it before McCarthy, if you want to. Notice the last line of Macbeth. To know my deed, 'twere best not know myself. Now, of course, the Delphi oracle of Greece was, know thyself. Socrates said the unexamined life is not worth living, and now you have an example where Macbeth says, I wish I didn't know myself, because I would have to admit what I've done, and I don't want to have to admit what I've done. We are now in Act 2, Scene 3, Scene 4. That's our ambition for the hour. Now, let's talk through real quickly where we've been so that we've got a sense of where we're going. Macbeth is a play about how to kill a man, but not in the way you would think. Not how to kill a man physically, but rather how to kill a man's spirit. We will watch Macbeth's spirit go away. He will become an evil villain. He begins by being an honorable warrior, at least within the context of the Anglo-Saxon motif, where cutting guys' heads off and disembowelling them is considered gentlemanly behavior. Of course, today we don't think about that unless we're in certain neighborhoods. The reality is that, however, we have got to get Duncan out of the way. So let's put this in our notes. This is kind of a two-part dance of a play. Part 1 is pre-Duncan. Part 2 is post-Duncan. By the end of the second act, Duncan is gone, kind of like Julius Caesar, where by the end of the second act, Caesar himself is already gone, and then we're ready to start looking at who the real protagonist of the play is. In that play, of course, Brutus. Here, we're going to look now at Macbeth. But before we get there, we've got to have some tension. So let's talk about the dynamic tension. You should be putting this in your notes right now. The dynamic tension of Act 2. We will begin, first of all, in 2:1 by Macbeth saying, if it's going to happen, let's get it done. 2:2, Lady Macbeth comes on stage and says, I would have killed him, but he looked too much like Daddy. Then onto the stage comes Macbeth, and as I said to you already, he is already physically a changed man. Not only because he's got blood all over his face and on his hands, but he is psychologically already beginning to crack. Of course, we saw it earlier when he begins to hallucinate and thinks he sees daggers, right? He refuses to go back and look at what it is that he has done. Put a note, that will be important in 2-3, okay? Here in a moment when we get into this third scene of the second act, it'll be significant that Macbeth kills the old man, walks out, and then says, I don't want to go back in the bedroom to see what I've done. Lady Macbeth will say, you are a wimp, infirm of purpose. You're not a man. You're not a real man. Give me the knives. I'll go in. I'll do this thing. I mean, how hard is it? The dead are like sleeping anyway. It ain't no big thing. But when Lady Macbeth comes back on stage, she's also kind of jacked up, which tells you that whatever it is she saw in that bedroom, it ain't a pretty picture. This knocking begins to kind of jerk both of them. Macbeth will lament at the end of 2-2, I wish, Duncan, you could wake up. Regrets are already starting to happen. And the question of guilt will become a huge part of this play. Let's write that one down as a potential other theme. The implications of guilt. You can do things kind of mindlessly, kind of thoughtlessly. I mean, we could easily, couldn't we, go to 3B, and I could ask you, from your own biography of 2 decades, can you think of one moment in your life when you did or said something that at the time was completely thoughtless? You didn't give any thought to it at all. You're like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's do it. Or you said something, it didn't even occur to you that what you were doing or saying would have powerful implications down the line. Didn't even occur to you. It was like completely thoughtless, and then all of a sudden, the aha moment happens later where you go, oh, crap. What I did or what I said, you can't take it back. But now it's created all of this negative energy, this drama or whatever. This play will play that game. Now to 2-3. Shakespeare needs what we call comic relief. You want to write this down as such. He will employ this in his plays periodically. Comic relief. Shakespeare is aware his plays are long. You don't get a sense of that when you do what we're doing, where you go a few lines every morning. But if you sit and watch the play, as some of you did last fall, you do get a sense. It's a 2-hour performance, and it gets to be kind of long. Shakespeare's aware of this. He's also aware that he's demanding emotional energy from his audience. So when he has a pretty intense scene, and he knows he's got an even more intense scene coming. Remember why they're knocking at the front door? Who's showing up at the front door to knock on Macbeth's castle door? Some guys that are there to pick up Duncan. Well, Duncan ain't getting out of bed this morning. Duncan's never getting out of bed. And the guys that are about to show up, they're the ones that are going to go in and look at him. And when they see what Lady Macbeth saw, clearly you're going to have all kinds of drama on this stage. So in between these two powerfully dramatic scenes, right, of 2-2 and later in 2-3, Shakespeare's going to invent some comedy, and he's going to do it in the form of the drunken porter, it's often called. Now, what does that mean? Well, castles had to have a gatekeeper, and so they had to have somebody that would sit at the gate door, right, and that was his job for the night, and basically he would let you in or not let you in depending upon who you were. There's knocking at the front door, and the porter is coming to out of a drunken stupor. We'll find out in a little bit he's been drinking, okay? But the porter now will imagine himself not as the gatekeeper for Macbeth's castle, but rather the gatekeeper for hell, where all kinds of different people are showing up, and he's the guy that opens the door to let them in. This will be humorous, but it'll also be interesting if you pay close attention to who gets into hell. That is to say, what is it that they've done that qualifies them to go to hell? Then, finally, the porter will come out of his drunken stupor, and he will be face to face with a really important character for us, Macduff. Macduff is here as kind of Duncan's major general to get Duncan out of bed and get him on his way, etc., etc. Only he's going to have this brief exchange with the porter where he says, what's going on? And the porter will say, well, we were drinking. And it will be at this point that Macbeth, the play, will allow Shakespeare to be able to make a comment about drinking and alcohol that's a little bit funny and a lot obscene. So, for example, he says about drinking, it promotes the desire for sex, but it reduces the ability of performance. Now, when Shakespeare would write a line like, yeah, I mean, any high school senior understands what that means. But when Shakespeare, hello, guys, we're not talking about 2013. We're talking about a play in 1600. And when Shakespeare has a drunk porter say that on stage, right, then it's obviously going to create some drama among conservative viewers of this play, which is why, again, they tried to shut down his playhouse, right, the Globe Theater. After that, you're going to have this interesting moment where Macduff is going to leave the stage to go get Duncan up. In the meantime, Macbeth's going to be standing on stage, and the audience will be watching Macbeth. Why are we watching Macbeth when this happens? What do we know is about to happen? Here's Macbeth standing on stage. Macduff is left to go get Duncan out of bed. Macbeth's standing on stage. What do we know is about to happen? Somebody's going to discover Duncan's dead body, right? And so you can kind of get this sense that the Macbeth character is a little bit worried, a little bit full of anxiety, and then all of a sudden, Macbeth will be asked about the night. Whoa, it was a weird night last night. Strange winds, and like winds were blowing, and the trees were like falling down and stuff. Macbeth's one comment is, it's humorous, it was a rough night. Yeah, it was a rough night for reasons that we already know. Then, onto the stage will come Macduff in a series of moments. I want to outline them for you for your notes. Horror. 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 I mean, what else do you say when you got a dead king? And he obviously has been majorly butchered or slaughtered in his bed while he slept. Comes onto the stage saying this. Macbeth will leave the stage. He will then come back on to the stage. And by that point, everybody's there, including Banquo. Why would I say it that way? Including Banquo. Why would I say it that way?
Because
Banquo is the only guy standing on that stage other than Lady Macbeth, who we'll get to in a second, who knows about the three prophecies. To be held Thane of Glamis, Thane of Cawdor, and then King hereafter. So it's like Banquo knows something, right? Then there's going to be this question about who did it. Well, it looked like the bodyguards did it. They were the ones smeared with blood lying right next to the king. And then all of a sudden Macbeth will say, oh, I'm really sorry that I had to kill the bodyguards. And they're like, what are you talking about? You killed the bodyguard. And then Macbeth realizes his plan was faulted in this regards. Clearly the bodyguards were going to wake up. There was Macbeth seeing Duncan's slaughtered body. He had to take care of the only people who could say what was really going on that night. And so he kills the two bodyguards. However, he will say it, strangely, well, I did it. Killing the bodyguards. Foul or fair, good or bad? Well, he will say it's a bad act. It looks like a bad act. But I did it because of fair, because I loved King Duncan. I saw Duncan lying there dead, and I was just so enraged that I had to kill the guys who killed him. Yeah. Now, who will the audience be looking at this moment? Obviously, Macbeth is one place you can look. But if you're not looking at Macbeth's face, who are you looking at? Well, obviously, you could be looking at Banquo, right? Who's going to be looking at him like, dude, really? You know, what is it? It's that 8th grade word, seriously? Isn't that how 8th graders like to say, seriously? Right? Okay, so it's that. Somebody said Lady Macbeth. Sure, you bet. We're going to be looking at Lady Macbeth. It will be right about then that Lady Macbeth does one of these. Oh! And she faints. Right? She faints. And in that moment, of course, everyone's like, oh, we got to take care of Lady Macbeth. The poor woman, the weak woman, she's fainting because of all of this happening, etc., etc. Of course, we understand it's a ploy, isn't it? The scene will then end with everybody saying, when we get on our manly readiness, which is to say our clothes, notice the juxtaposition of two themes, manhood and clothing. When we get all of that on, we're going to come back and try and figure out what's going on. And then everyone's going to leave the stage. And I'm on page 369 for a second. And then everyone's going to leave the stage except for Malcolm and Donalbain, the two sons of Duncan. Now, why would those two boys be a little bit freaked out right now? Their daddy got bummed. Right, daddy got jacked. Keep going, though.
Because if someone wants to kill the king, they'll probably kill the king.
Clearly, this is a serious issue. Who's next in line to the throne? Right? And then after Malcolm, who's next in line to the throne? Donald Bane, the two sons of the king, right? So if they're going to kill Daddy, there's a good likelihood they might what? Right, come after us as well. So obviously there's all kinds of concerns here, right? They're not exactly sure who's done this. Interesting, there are daggers in men's smiles. Right? Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. There's no art to find the mind's construction in the face. Interesting, daggers are the way Duncan... Daggers, false face must hide what false art doth know, you bet. There's, of course, daggers is the way Duncan himself got jacked, right? All right, let's go ahead and listen to this interesting scene. We'll follow it now. Go ahead, we're at 2-3, the drunken porter scene, and what's wrong with drinking alcohol?
Oh, here's a knocking indeed. Oh, if a man were porter of Hellgate, he should have old turning the key. No. Who's there in the name of Beelzebub? Here's a farmer that hanged himself on the expectation of plenty. Come in time. Have napkins enough about you. Here you'll sweat for it. No. Who's there in the other devil's name? Oh, faith, here's an equivocator that could swear in both the scales against either scale, who committed treason enough for God's sake, yet could not equivocate to heaven. Oh, come in, equivocator. Oh, no. Who's there? Faith, is an English tailor come hither for stealing out of a French hose, eh? Come in, tailor. Here you may roast your goose, eh? No, never it quiet. What are you? But, this place is too cold for hell. I'll devil potter it no further. I had thought to have let in some of all professions that go the primrose way to the everlasting bonfire. Anon. I pray you, remember the porter.
Was it so late, friend, you went to bed that you do lie so late?
Oh, faith, sir, we were carousing till the second cock. And drink, sir, is a great provoker of three things.
What three things does drink especially provoke?
Marry, sir. Nose painting, sleep, and urine. Literally, sir, it provokes and unprovokes. It provokes the desire, but it takes away the performance. Therefore, much drink may be said to be an equivocator with lechery. It makes him, and it mars him. It sets him on, and it takes him off. It persuades him and disheartens him, makes him stand to and not stand to. In conclusion, equivocates him in a sleep, and giving him the lie, leaves him.
And the drink gave thee the lie last night.
That it did, sir, in the very throat on me. But I requited him for his lie, and I think, being too strong for him, though he took up my legs sometime, yet I made a shift to cast him.
Is thy master stirring? Our knocking has awaked him. Here he comes.
Good morrow, noble sir.
Good morrow, both.
Is the king stirring, worthy Thane?
Not yet.
He did command me to call timely on him. I have almost slipped the hour.
I'll bring you to him.
I know this is a joyful trouble to you, but yet 'tis one.
The labor we delight in physics pain. This is the door.
I'll make so bold to call, for 'tis my limited service.
Goes the king hence today?
He does. He did appoint so.
The night has been unruly. Where we lay, our chimneys were blown down, and as they say, lamentings heard i' the air. Strange screams of death, and prophesying with accents terrible of dire combustion and confused events, new hatched to the woeful time. The obscure bird clamoured the livelong night. Some say the earth was feverous and did shake.
'Twas a rough night.
My young remembrance cannot parallel a fellow to it.
Oh, horror! 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 Tongue nor heart cannot conceive nor name thee.
What's the matter?
Confusion now hath made his masterpiece. Most sacrilegious murder hath broke up the Lord's anointed temple and stole thence the life of the building.
What is to say, the life?
Mean you, his majesty?
Approach the chamber and destroy your sight with a new Gorgon. Do not bid me speak. See, and then speak yourselves. Awake, awake, ring the alarm bell. Murder and treason. Banquo and Doublebane, Malcolm, awake. Shake off this downy sleep death's counterfeit and look on death itself. Up and see the great doom's image. Malcolm, Banquo, as from your graves rise up and walk like sprites to countenance this horror.
What's the business that such a hideous trumpet calls to parley the sleepers of the house? Speak, speak.
Gentle lady, 'tis not for you to hear what I can speak. The repetition in a woman's ear would murder as it fell. Oh, Banquo, Banquo, our royal master's murdered.
Oh, alas, what in our house?
Too true anywhere. Dear Duff, I prithee contradict thyself and say it is not so.
Had I but died an hour before this chance, I had lived a blessed time. For from this instant there's nothing serious in mortality. All is but toys. Renown and grace is dead. The wine of life is drawn, and the mere lees is left this vault to brag of.
What is amiss?
You are, and do not know it. The spring, the head, the fountain of your blood is stopped. The very source of it is stopped.
Your royal father's murdered.
By whom? Those of his chamber, as it seemed, had done't. Their hands and faces were all badged with blood. So were their daggers, which unwiped we found upon their pillows. They stared and were distracted. No man's life was to be trusted with them.
Oh, yet I do repent me of my fury that I did kill them.
Wherefore did you so?
Oh, who can be wise, amazed, temperate and furious, loyal and neutral in a moment? No man. The expedition of my violent love outran the pause of reason. Here lay Duncan, his silver skin laced with his golden blood, and his gashed stabs looked like a breach in nature for ruin's wasteful entrance. There the murderers, steeped in the colors of their trade, their daggers unmannily breached with gore. Who could refrain that had a heart to love, and in that heart courage to make love known?
Help me, Hans.
Look to the lady.
Why do we hold our tongues that most may claim this argument for ours?
What should be spoken here? Where our feet hid in an auger hole may rush and seize us. Let's away. Our tears are not yet brewed.
Nor our strong sorrow upon the foot of motion.
Look to the lady. And when we have our naked frailties hid that suffer in exposure, let us meet and question this most bloody piece of work, to know it further. Fears and scruples shake us. In the great hand of God I stand, and thence against the undivulged pretense I fight of treasonous malice.
And so do I.
Oh, let's briefly put on manly readiness and meet in the hall together.
What will you do? Let's not consort with them. To show an unfelt sorrow is an office which the false man does easy. I'll to England.
To Ireland I. Our separated fortune shall keep us both the safer. Where we are, there's daggers in men's smiles. The near in blood, the nearer bloody.
This murderous shaft that shot hath not yet lighted, and our safest way is to avoid the aim. Therefore to horse, and let us not be dainty of leave-taking, but shift away. There's warrant in that theft which steals itself, when there's no mercy left.
Macbeth goes off stage. He comes back on stage. He will speak words when he comes back on stage. Find those lines right now. Those are amazing lines. Shakespeare will demonstrate his genius in this moment. He can have the audience understand words that characters on stage will understand totally differently. Take a look at what he says. I'm on page 368. Macbeth comes back on stage. Remember, he didn't want to go into that room and see the dead body of Duncan. Now he's done it. We know, we'll find out just a second later, while he was in there, he killed the 2 bodyguards. Uh-oh. Now how many has he killed? Well, that all depends on how you count. Because remember, at the beginning of the play, we're told he killed all kinds of guys, including the bad guy where he cut, right? But you're right. You're going to make a difference between killing and murder. Now he's up to 3 murders, right? But notice what he says when he comes back on stage. Had I but died an hour, I'm on page 368, line roughly 83. Look at this. This is amazing writing. Macbeth will say, had I but died an hour before this chance, I had lived a blessed time. Put in your own words. What did he just say? What did he just say? Had I but died an hour before this chance, if I had died an hour ago, I had lived a blessed time. I wouldn't have killed the king. Well, the audience knows that's what he means, right? Look at what he says next. For from this instant there's nothing serious in mortality. All is but toys. Renown and grace is dead. The people on stage will think he's talking about Duncan. We realize, what is he saying about his own honor? It's gone, isn't it? Look what he says. The wine of life is drawn, and the mere lees is left this vault to brag of. There's not even any of the very bottom lees at the bottom of the wine bottle. It's all gone. Macbeth, of course, will be understood by characters on stage to be talking about a dead king. We as an audience understand this is Macbeth's first admission. He has totally screwed up. He will never be the man he was before. Finally, notice the two brothers, they decide to leave. Why? They're trying to protect themselves. Why do they split up? It makes sense, right? That way, if there's an assassin who's trying to kill them, he's going to have to work a lot harder to get them if they're separated. Where does Malcolm go? Malcolm goes where? He goes to England. Where does Donalbain go? He goes to Ireland. Put it in your notes. We'll never really hear from Donalbain again, right? It will be Malcolm's play for the rest of the play, and Malcolm will head off to England. Wait a minute. Why is this a bad idea? We understand it is a good idea. Jot down in your notes, why is a bad idea? Think about it for a second. The 2 sons leave without telling anybody where they're going. Well, obviously Macbeth ultimately will be the next in line to the throne if the 2 sons leave. But that's not the answer to our question. Why is it a bad idea for the 2 sons to run off? In what ways do they look guilty, Mr. Fromm? Yeah. In other words, clearly bodyguards are not killing the king for their own benefit. Clearly bodyguards were quote-unquote paid off if they're the ones that did it, right? Well, who would have anything to gain by a dead king? Obviously the next in line to the throne. The fact that the 2 sons run away can make it kind of look like they're the guilty ones. And now finally to the 4th and final scene of Act 2. A very brief scene where Ross, our messenger, again remember, and Macduff are going to make some comments together about what has transpired. What do you know? Because the 2 boys have left Scotland, guess who gets to now be named king? Yeah, we're going to finish Act 2 with Macbeth getting what he wanted, which was to be king. Watch this. Follow these lines here. It's a very brief scene to finish the 2nd act.
£70 I can remember well, within the volume of which time I have seen hours dreadful and things strange. But this sore night hath trifled for my knowing.
Good father, thou seest the heavens as trouble with man's act threatens his bloody stage. By the clock 'tis day, and yet dark night strangles the travelling lamp. Is't night's predominance, or the day's shame, that darkness does the face of earth entomb when living light should kiss it?
'Tis unnatural, even like the deed that's done. On Tuesday last, a falcon, towering in her pride of place,
was by a mousing owl, hawked at and killed. And Duncan's horses, a thing most strange and certain, beauteous and swift, the minions of their race, turned wild in nature, broke their stalls, flung out, contending against obedience as they would make war with mankind. 'Tis said they ate each other. They did so, to the amazement of mine eyes that looked upon. Here comes the good Macduff. How goes the world, sir, now?
Why, see you not?
Is't known who did this more than bloody deed?
Those that Macbeth has slain.
Alas, the day. What good could they pretend?
They were suborned. Malcolm and Donalbain, the king's two sons, are stolen away and fled, which puts upon them suspicion of the deed.
Against nature still. Thriftless ambition that wilt ravin up thine own life's means. Then 'tis most like the sovereignty will fall upon Macbeth.
He is already named and gone to Scone to be invested.
Where is Duncan's body?
Carried to Combe Kiln, the sacred storehouse of his predecessors and guardian of their bones.
Will you to Scone?
No, cousin. I'll to Fife.
Well, I will thither.
Well, may you see things well done there. Adieu. Lest our old robes sit easier than our new.
Farewell, father.
God's benison go with you, and with those that would make good of bad, and friends of foes.
Now, Shakespeare, stay right there at that final line. Put it in your notes. What do you find interesting about the very last lines of the second act?
Make good of bad and foul.
Yeah, right. Fair is foul and foul is fair. Now, of course, Shakespeare could have used the actual words fair and foul, right? But that would have been too easy and too obvious, correct? But notice he's continuing to play the game. Go back to 371 real quickly. Notice it's Macduff who will say, when the question is, how's it going? How goes the world? I'm on page 371, the last couple of lines on that page. Macduff will say, why, see you not? Like, are you blind? Can you not see what's going on? Which, of course, will remind us of the lines from the very first scene, hover through the fog and filthy air. Question for those of you who grew up around ponies. We are told that there was some bad things that last night happened. But one of them was that Duncan's two stallions started eating each other. Now, those of you who've grown up around ponies, have you ever known ponies to eat meat? I mean, do horses eat each other? No, this is what we're told. In other words, the point here that Shakespeare's trying to make is that whatever is happening is totally unnatural. It is not what you normally would ever expect to happen. Of course, the word unnatural is used, right, against nature still is used. And then finally, notice Macduff will say, I hope things are going to work out. I'm on page 372. Lest our old robes sit easier than our new. This is an important moment for the garment theme, and here's why. From this point on, Macbeth is the king. The way you know a king is by two things. One, he wears a robe, right? Purple robe. That will show he's a king. Secondly, he wears a crown and he has a scepter in his hand. When this play is usually performed, it's important that the crown not quite fit. It's just a little too big for the head of the king, so that he's constantly pushing it up. Says what? What does it say? It's a symbol of saying what? Yeah, he's not a real king. And the garment that he wears, this robe that he wears, it doesn't quite fit him right. It always seems to be too big. It always kind of hangs off him incorrectly. Here Macduff is already setting this up. I hope he says that the new robes can sit as well as the old robes. Macduff is already onto it. That's significant because our play will end with Macbeth and Macduff coming face to face. The groundlings paid their money to see those kinds of fights, and definitely Shakespeare is going to provide them with that kind of fight. But first, we've got to get through two more acts where Macbeth becomes a serial killer. Now, I don't mean he eats Fruit Loops. That's not what we mean when we say serial killer, right? We're talking about a killer who will kill again and again And again, he's already up to a body count of 3, correct? But he ain't done. He ain't even close to being done. We're going to watch him as he goes through the rest of the play, jack people over and over again. Of course, the true serial killers are the ones that no longer have to do it themselves. They can get surrogates to do it for them, right? Assassins, what he will call cutthroats.